So this is a presentation of the Lives of Alcyone that I'm presenting through the Seattle Lodge. As I was working on this, I was contemplating to myself, what makes Krishnamurti Krishnamurti? When you see him talk to physicists, movement leaders, world leaders, crowds of listeners, it is as though he's listening to other voices, or maybe his own higher voice before he answers. In the Mahatma Letters class, and in other classes in the Theosophical Society, we talk about the path and the unknown tests we face. This is the story of one life and efforts as an illustration of this life and those tests. This is not theoretical, it is real. We have help along the way, whether we know it or not. And what I hope to convey in this program is the vast amount of time we have, as this story really starts before the 42 lives tabulated, as there is an anecdote in Man, Whence, How, and Whither, in which Alcyone is lured into a black magic orgy in ancient Atlantis. So Jiddu Krishnamurti was born a Brahmin on May 11th, 1895, near Madras in the south of India. He was the 8th son, and in keeping with tradition, was named after Sri Krishna. On January 23rd, 1909, the Jiddu family moved to Madras. In May of that year, theosophical leader and clairvoyant C.W. Leadbeater noticed 13-year-old Krishnamurti, who was playing on the beach, and sees the most wonderful aura he has ever seen, without a particle of selfishness. Although Theosophist and scholar Ernest Wood, who had tried to help him with his homework, considered him dim-witted, Leadbeater predicted that he would become a spiritual teacher and a great orator, much greater, he said, than even Annie Besant. Soon, C.W. Leadbeater started researching their past lives and became aware of the relationship with himself and the masters. These accounts were published in articles in the Theosophist magazine. So Charles Leadbeater, 1854 to 1934, the star name he gave himself was Sirius. Born in England, ordained as a priest in the Anglican Church in 1879, joined the Theosophical Society in 1883, went to India with HPB in 1884, and he essentially turned his back on Great Britain and left with basically the clothes on his back, where he took the 5 vows as a Buddhist. In 1885, his master gave him instruction to open his psychic abilities. He wrote over 30 books. He and Annie Besant collaborated on many books and studies. Annie Besant, star name Heracles, was born in London. She was a British socialist, women's rights activist, writer, orator, philanthropist. She met HPB in 1890 and joined the Theosophical Society. Annie Besant was president of the Theosophical Society from 1907 to her death in 1933. She authored many books on theosophy and collaborated with Leadbeater on many books and investigations. This is the 2-volume set of the Lives of Alcyone. My mother bought books, and these books have her name imprinted on the cover. So this is the account of the last 42 lives of Krishnamurti as researched by Leadbeater and Besant, first published, as I say, in the Theosophist magazine. Leadbeater assigned star names to he identified people by their causal bodies because he was awake and aware at the causal level. So to keep track of all those characters through the ages, he assigned them star names. So how are these investigations done? Characters are identified by their causal body, as that's the one thing that does not change from life to life. The investigators use the faculties of the causal body and simply read the records. Since in many of these stories of the past, investigators themselves have had a part, a second method of inquiry has often been open to them to throw themselves back into those forms of long ago and actually live over those stirring lives, to feel once more what they felt thousands of years ago, to look upon the world from the strangely different viewpoints of an Indian ascetic, an Atlantean noble, or an Aryan invader. So when past lives are discussed, how is it possible to fix the time? It has been done by strenuous labor and much wearisome counting, starting usually from some point previously determined, and whenever possible, the results obtained have been verified by some sort of cross-reference or by astronomical observations. Errors of counting may, of course, have crept in, but the margin is small and no trouble was spared to obtain accuracy. So how are the characters identified? History cannot be written without names. And as reincarnation is a fact, and therefore the reappearance of the same individual throughout succeeding ages is also a fact, the ego playing many parts under many names. The recognized egos were given distinguishing names so that he or she may be recognized through all the lives. These are mostly names of constellations, stars, or Greek heroes. The names of those who constantly appear in this story as ordinary men and women, but who are now masters, may make these great beings more real to them. They have climbed to where they stand on the same ladder of life up which they are climbing now. They have known the common household life, the joys and sorrows, the successes and failures which make up human experiences. They are not gods, perfect from unending ages, but men and women who have unfolded the God within themselves and have, along a toilsome road, reached the superhuman. CWL, I call him, that's Leadbeater, CWL, identifies these characters as a band of servers whose job it is to help at the beginning of the development of a root body type, build new civilizations, and instigate religions. This is not the only such group. There are many such groups, but this is the one he identified. Another very curious group is composed of entities whose link with the clan is less defined, for their connection with it seems more hostile than friendly. A decided instance of this is Scorpio, who comes down through the ages in violent opposition to Heracles, an attitude still maintained in the present life, in which hatred and unscrupulousness are as prominent as ever, although the power to harm has obviously decreased with the passage of time. And because there are 48 lives tabulated, there's no time to describe them all. So I will narrate the ones that included portraits. And according to a note in volume 2 by Annie Besant, the portraits in the book are done from descriptions of the personalities and painted by MLK, and I don't know who that person is, a fortunate combination of artist, intuitive, and clairvoyant. Here's a list of some of the characters. And as you'll find at the end, I have an extensive file of, it's 3 pages long of characters and who they are. And I would be happy to send it to anyone who wants it. So most of these lives, I had to throw these in, Master Morya and Master Kuthumi, but we start really with Man, Whence, How, and Whither. As this book states, Man, Whence, How, and Whither, the children of the Manu were in no sense a primitive people, beginning as they did with many hundreds and thousands of years of civilization behind them in Atlantis, and more years under their own Manu in Arabia and Northern Asia. The population could all read and write, including those who did what is considered the lowest work. Most of the lives were ordinary and prosaic. When Alcyone was a woman, she married and had many children, but usually managed to have adventures. When Alcyone was a man, he was a soldier, a ruler, an adventurer, a teacher, a priest, a householder. A theme that runs through many lives is a search for spirituality and strength to escape from those who would lure him or her into black magic. Another is the sacrifice needed when he was presented with the possibility of marrying someone who was prevented either by chosen by another person, or sometimes the parents intervened. From the first recorded life, he was connected to those who are now adepts, but who were mostly where we are now. And I strongly recommend reading these lives as a window into the far past, as the stories are very long with much detail about the configuration of the earth, the various civilizations, the customs of the time, clothing, food, activity, modes of transportation, technology, etc., that you don't find in today's history and archaeology. So our story starts when Vavasvato Manu led his selected band from Atlantis to Arabia and thence to the shores of the Gobi Sea in Central Asia. And this is where the fifth body type was to be developed. So our story starts in 70,000 BCE, when the community numbers about 75,000 people. So how is the body type developed? Here's the basic method. It's a lot like devising a new breed of dog, or developing a new plant, or something like that. The Manus selected some children from the community and had them move onto the White Island for safety, because he knew that soon the barbarian hordes would come and wipe out all the communities. So as soon as the children were safely settled upon the island, the destruction which the Manu had foreseen fell upon the villages on the mainland. The Turanian hordes swept down in overwhelming numbers and massacred the entire colony. He then incarnated into the small colony which was saved, so that he could mold his bodies close to the pattern defined. He repeated this as he incarnated as his grandchild, etc., to improve the body type. And this basic pattern was repeated until the Manu was satisfied with the new body type. We overleap some 10,000 years from the first massacre and come down to what may be regarded as the final step in the foundation of the root body type. More than once before, what looks like a tentative or abortive commencement had been made, and after a few centuries of growth, the body type was swept off the face of the earth by an inrush of savages. Each time, a few of the most promising children were saved from the massacre to become the seed for the next attempt. The Manu, having no personal karma to hinder him, made for himself each time a body closely approximating the pattern given for that body type by the solar deity. The only difficulty in his way being the limitations imposed upon that body by a parentage, though the best available was necessarily short of perfection. He had to take a wife from the existing body types, and therefore his children naturally fell somewhat below his level in special developments peculiar to the new type. But usually he incarnated several times in the line of his own descendants, and each time brought the body type nearer to that type. The last of the massacres took place about 60,000 BCE. This was the beginning of the fifth root body type. The development of the sub-body types is similar, but without the wholesale massacres. And it's interesting to know how absolutely the Manu looks upon everything that happens only from the point of view of the plan as a whole. The massacre of his new body type is to him by no means a matter of regret. It is a necessary part of the scheme. We observe not only on this, but on many other occasions, that physical death is not regarded by the great ones as it usually is in the outer world. Our modern tendency is to consider it as the greatest of all evils, to inflict it as the ultimate punishment. Those leaders who know so much more than we account it as merely an incident in the work which is being done, or sometimes as a reward for a piece of work well performed. Well, indeed, would it be for us if we could acquire this attitude of the masters of the wisdom, if we could watch with larger eyes and see the truth which lies behind the illusory outer appearance. So this is the first life that we have a picture for. Life number 19. This was a very eventful life. 22,662 BCE. She was the eldest daughter of Mizar and Helios. Her father was an Atlantean noble, born into the eastern part of what is now Massachusetts in North America, but then it was, of course, Atlantis. At the age of 6 months, she was consecrated in a temple where her guardianship was linked to an angel. That promise was for all time, not just one life. She married Sirius, who had vowed at age 3, when he was attending her consecration ceremony, that he would marry her. And they got married and had 16 children. She was aware of the psychic world and had uncomfortable experiences with elementals from a form of early magic from an evolution lower than the physical. Mercury was a priest and neutralized those elementals. She lived a remarkable life, visiting temples and going on pilgrimages. During a pilgrimage to a temple in what is now Yucatan, they attended an initiation ceremony by Surya, who blessed all there. Surya also referred to the name Alcyone would take in the 47th life when Alcyone met and followed Buddha. On the way home, her mother died, and the family was distressed because they did not have the usual acid that dissolved a dead body. Remember, this is from the Atlantean civilization. Mercury, the priest, placed his hands on the body and disintegrated it. She had a prophetic dream of finding gold, which came true, and the gold supported her and her husband in their old age and allowed them to be very charitable. During her last 20 years, she wrote a book in 2 volumes on religious subjects and died at age 84. Life number 20, 21,750 BCE. She was born in Burma. She was a daughter of Brihat and Neptune. Her father was a ruler and a priest of a small community. Her horoscope destined her to a marriage to Saturn, a distant relative, and to bear a child of remarkable power and holiness. So her life was directed toward this event. At the age of 15, she married, and a year later, Surya was born to her with great rejoicing over this, and every care was taken for this child of promise. Everything seemed to portend a brilliant life, but when Surya was a year old, the house was accidentally set on fire, and Alcyone, who was not home, rushed in to save her baby and died from severe burns. Life 25. Twin sons, Alcyone and Sirius, were born to Leo and Achilles on an island in the Sahara Sea in what is now North Africa. It was an advanced kingdom where learning was valued, public order was maintained, architecture and sculpture were of a high order, and roads, gardens, and fountains were plentiful. He married Helios and had 3 children. Both boys attended the university, and after graduation, Alcyone was offered a post on the permanent staff of the university. He convinced his father and brother to give half of their huge estate to the university, enlarging and improving it. He recruited teachers from many areas, developed the library, and coordinated with other libraries in Egypt, Poseidonis, and India. He devised and had built a rock tramway operated by water power to convey students to the university and back. He invited professors of the highest reputations to teach. Up until the last, he retained the keenest interest in the university, and his son Heracles carried on the work when he died in his sleep at age 71, 2 years after his twin, leaving a university that lasted some 2,000 years. Life number 28. She was born in the Gobi Sea area. The city they called Manoa because it was started by the Manu. She was born the daughter of Mars and Mercury with her older sister Heracles. She was part of a migration into India that took many, many years. During the blessing for their journey, Surya the priest told the sisters that this was the first of lives of expiation, that old karma may be outworn and old wrongs made right, and that death would come to them in a strange and violent way. And this word expiation, that means you have to balance a bunch of karma. It's not going to be fun. There was a long explanation of the pilgrimage from Asia into India. It took them a long time. They had skirmishes and friends and enemies along the way. King Mars had banned the old Atlantean religion of the area that they moved into, which incorporated forms of black magic. They believed that their black rites would make them invincible to the new invaders. Heracles was teaching the deeper knowledge of the Atlantean white magic, mingled with the bright gods in her ancient home, to some of the younger people, and had included some of the young priests of the older, dark Atlantean faith. This challenged the older priesthood and threatened them. During a ruse, which caused the absence of the people where the sisters were staying, a mob stormed the house and captured them. The high priest, Scorpio, of that dark religion, who was secretly hiding in the evil temple, tried to get the sisters to renounce their religion and worship the dark gods in return for their lives. When they refused, they were killed by the dark forces in a blood ceremony. And in the book, there's a description of that is pretty horrific. So I'm not including that part of it. Next life number 29. Born in India, her father was Cetus, a priest of a dark religion. Her mother was Cancer, kindly but anxious. Her childhood was full of vague terrors. At the age of 16, she fell in love with Pollux, a bright, handsome, careless fellow who got her pregnant and then left. She had to confess to her parents. Her father was incensed and forced her to marry Scorpio, a black magician who was a medium for horrible influences. Her mother suggested a way of revenge on Pollux, which involved killing her baby and poisoning Pollux in a particular horrible way. At the moment when she was handing the cup of poison to Pollux, who brought his little son for the visit, she really realized what she was doing. The little son looked up at her and she suddenly realized what she was doing. She dashed the cup to the floor, ran out of the house and out of the town, and ran for miles until dusk, until she was exhausted and she saw a house and went there. Achilles, the woman of the house, took her in and told her that she had escaped from those horrors and she must forget that life and begin again. In a dream, a man of commanding presence, Mercury, spoke words of comfort, telling her that the awful life had two aspects, that her sufferings had paid off debts from past lives, and the life had been in the nature of a test to see if her will was strong enough to break through the powerful influences of black evil. And she also studied the emerging religion of Hinduism and died a renowned wise woman. Life number 30. She was daughter of Leo, a farmer and a priest of the prevailing religion, which was a precursor of today's Hinduism. She took keen interest in the ceremonies and saw the forces and elementals involved in them. Her brother Uranus could not see them, so Alcyone described them. She and her brother had a lot of religious questions that the parents couldn't answer. They, however, had heard of a community of religious teachings that was more rumor than fact, but when they were old enough, they set out to find it. After a difficult journey, they found the secluded Atlantean community and with much begging were accepted into it and stayed for some years. They really had to beg because as a woman, she was not really invited into the community, but they managed to live close to them and be a participant for a number of years. She married one of the monks in that community who was Atlantean, and she was not, she was Aryan. Later, Uranus had a sacred book from the community that they studied. Their home became a religious center, and she died at age 91. A renowned religious figure. Life 33. Now, this is a life that really makes me nostalgic. Born into what is now Peru in a utopian socialist kingdom where no one starved, everyone had appropriate work. He was a successful governor and priest and lived for a long life. 12,000 years before the Christian era, there existed in the country we now call Peru one of the most remarkable civilizations that the world has ever seen. Here it must suffice to say that under the Inca Mars, an absolute autocrat who reigned by divine right, with the result that poverty was entirely unknown, the general average of public health and happiness was out of proportion higher than any country in the present day. The organization was so perfect that death occurred only from old age or accident. No one needed to work after the age of 45. There was practically no law but that of public opinion, and no punishment except the expulsion from the community of anyone who by uncivilized behavior was considered to have forfeited the privilege of belonging to it. The most marvelous of civilizations lasted unchanged for thousands of years, much as did that of Egypt. So we find Alcyone born there in 12,093 BCE as the son of Uranus and Hesperia, and was closely connected to the royal family since Uranus was the brother of the Inca Mars. Alcyone was the younger brother of Sirius. He learned reading and writing and calligraphy and became so good at it that he was employed by the priests to do a lot of manuscripts for the Cusco temples. At this period, no human or animal sacrifices were offered in Peru, only fruit and flowers. They did have step pyramids with temples up at the top. Much praise was offered to the sun as the manifestation of the deity, but no prayer, as it was supposed that the deity knew best what was good for his creatures. They believed in a progressive existence after death, the conditions of which depended upon the man's actions during life, and it was considered wrong and ungrateful to mourn for the dead because the deity did not like to see his children suffer. Reincarnation was not clearly present in their teaching, though there were some texts which were referenced to it. Mizar, the daughter of Vesta and Mira, married Alcyone. As they belonged to the ruling class, public opinion exacted from them ceaseless activity in the interest of the community, and their course in life was practically marked out for them by the mere fact of their birth. The business of this ruling class was always to rule, but to rule entirely in the interest of the people. There was a doctrine in the religious teaching that beauty of form and color was especially pleasing to the deity, and that the production of such beauty might be regarded as an acceptable offering to him. Alcyone took up this matter and brought it prominently forward, making this value of beauty his especial gospel. He maintained remarkable vigor even up to extreme old age, and continued to travel constantly all over the empire to oversee the various educational establishments until within a few days of his death. His wife Mizar had died 4 years previously at the age of 84. Life number 35. Alcyone was born in a coast town in India called Kanuri, only a few miles from Puri. He entered the temple. He married Ajax, and in the course of a few years had a family of 12 children. He entered the temple where they spoke of the deity as the sea-born sun. He was extremely sensitive and to some extent psychic and clairvoyant when young, sufficiently so at least to see nature spirits and sometimes to hear voices, especially one which occasionally gave him counsel at crises in his life. On one occasion, this voice gave him the startling information that there were people living in the interior of the earth and offered to lead him to a certain cave by which he could gain admission to their dwelling place, or rather one of their dwelling places. He eagerly accepted the offer, but unfortunately it was coupled with a condition that he should tell no one of the expedition if he wished to undertake it. He doubted much as to the wisdom of this course, but eventually to make the journey and attempt to verify the statement, he did, but he stipulated that a certain friend, Demeter, should be allowed to accompany him. Demeter was another young priest, a son of one of the chief priests of the same temple, and the original reason of the bond between them was that Demeter also could see nature spirits and could sometimes hear the same inner voice. They could take no servants, they could take a little food and lots of torches. So they found the cave and they followed this labyrinth down into a cavern, a big cavern where this strange light was there. They saw people there that were of an odd lead color, who had no clothing, who didn't seem to have any work, who didn't really have any shelter. Their food was raw animals, kind of like lizards, and a huge fungoid growth, like a giant toadstool. So these two, when they were down there, they ate the toadstool. They found it sustaining, but not very good. But they didn't want anything to do with raw lizards. CWL mentions that these people still exist. They were there for about 2 weeks, and then the voice told them to return home to face another challenge. So Alcyone went on a pilgrimage, and I'm shortening this a lot. I mean, this story goes on and on for pages and pages, and it's all really well written and interesting. But he went on a pilgrimage to visit some shrines with his sons. He was shipwrecked. His sons were killed. He was captured and enslaved and endured many hardships before getting home again after 3 years and finally returning to the priesthood. But this was quite a life. Life number 41. Born to royalty in India, the daughter of the local Raja Karoma with her twin brother Sirius, with whom she was psychically sensitive. She married Mizar and had 7 children. Sirius also married, and after he became king, his wife Orion and Alcyone were termed the 2 queens and were always together. Alcyone and Sirius were so linked that they were ill together and recovered together and died on the same day. Like most of her lives, she lived to a ripe old age. Unless she was killed, for whatever reason, she lived well into her 80s. So life number 46, born into what is now Iran or Persia, we come to one of the most momentous lives in this long series, the lives to which all the others have been leading up. Even in these, we will see much of suffering. In this 46th life, and in the next, we find him playing a humble part in the foundation of 2 of the great religions of the world. And so incidentally, in studying his lives, we obtain fascinating glimpses of some of the most important periods of human history. Alcyone was born at a place called Drepsa in Bactria in the year 1528 BCE. He was the son of a man of high family, Hector, who was the brother of Sireb. His mother Bee died while he was still young, so that he was chiefly in the care of his aunt Vajra. So the religion that he helped found was Zoroastrianism. And his great grief was that he and his brother fell deeply in love with Mizar, whose father prevented it. And in later life, he fell deeply in love with Demeter in his sort of middle age. And again, he was prevented from marriage. So he had a lot of sorrow in that life, but also a lot of self-sacrifice. Life number 47, born in Benares. Alcyone and his brother, or his cousin Mizar, owned a temple where pilgrims stayed and animals were sacrificed. They disagreed about using the temple as a moneymaker, and they disagreed about the animal sacrifice, and it caused a rift of many years and many hard feelings. Go on and on with a description of that. Mizar's wife Thetis poisoned Alcyone's son, who later died. So Alcyone banned them from their home with much hatred and much anger. After he became Buddha, the Lord Gautama remembered the king's kindly request and came and preached at Rajgira in the year 588. He was then 35, having been born in the year 623. Alcyone and Mizar went to hear him, and Alcyone was immensely impressed and lifted clear out of his hopelessness and depression. The Lord Buddha preached about sorrow and karma, and much of what he said exactly fitted Alcyone's case and wonderfully relieved his aching heart. The teaching eradicated the hate and anger in Alcyone's heart, and he vowed to consecrate his life to bring peace to the world as the Buddha had done. His cousin also vowed to follow Buddha, but he had to stay with the family temple and maintain it. But he stopped the animal sacrifice. Alcyone attached himself to the Lord Buddha, traveling with him. Every vestige of anger and revenge was wiped from the heart of Alcyone, and the qualities of compassion, forgiveness, and true affection were developed in him to the utmost. How deep and essential in his nature was the result produced by this most fortunate of lives may be seen by the fact that the average interval between his lives has been entirely altered by it. Before this, the average was about 700 years, and since then it has been 1200. Alcyone died in 559 at the age of 71, 16 years before the death of the Lord Buddha in 543, and the latter part of his life was passed in unalloyed peace and happiness. Life 48. The son of Ant, the family was Brahmin by descent, but Buddhist by religion. And like many Buddhist boys, he put on the yellow robe. At age 15, he fell in love with Ajax, but he also vowed to become a monk. And Ajax also decided to become a monk, as they decided not to marry, but to devote their lives to the religious life. Alcyone was a beautiful young man, and he was wrongly accused by Scorpio, who tried to entrap him. When this came to the attention of the abbot, Alcyone was set out on pilgrimages to shrines, which got him out of the way and took about a year. He had close association with the revered Arya Sangha and was a contributor to the Book of Golden Precepts, which of course we know as the voice of the silence. He became a temple librarian because of his love of books. He preached constantly against the luxury of the times and contrived to do it without alienating his audience, because he never attacked it as wickedness as other reformers did, but gently and persistently reminded his hearers that attachment always brings sorrow. Often the leader of some of the rival factions would come to him to plead the justice of their cause and ask for his blessing upon their warfare, but his answer was always the same, that no cause, however good, could make wrong right or justify slaughter or oppression. And he died at age 70. Then he became Jiddu Krishnamurti, life 49, 1885 to 1986. After dissolving the Order of the Star in 1929, he went on to become a speaker on philosophical, psychological, and spiritual subjects. There are many books on his ideas. He always remained on the best terms with any Besant. He did not leave the Theosophical Society, but he freed himself from all organizations. He met and conversed with many scientists, religious people, and philosophers. He founded several schools around the world, including Brockwood Park School, an international educational center. When asked, he enumerated the following as his educational aims. 1, global outlook, a vision of the whole as distinct from the part. There should never be a sectarian outlook, but always a holistic outlook free from all prejudice. 2, concern for man and the environment. Humanity is part of nature, and if nature is not cared for, it will boomerang on man. Only the right education and deep affection between people everywhere will resolve many problems, including the environmental challenges. 3, religious spirit, which includes the scientific temper. The religious mind is alone, but not lonely. It is in communing with people and nature. And the Krishnamurti Foundation, established in 1928 by him and Annie Besant, runs many schools in India and abroad. And here's where I found a lot of the sources here. You can get online and find digital copies of the Lives of Alcyone. There are a couple of platforms for this. One is universalcomasonry.org. Another one is Ananda Golap, and he has all of the books there, the Lives of Alcyone. That also includes extensive kind of charts of family relationships. And Man, Whence, How, and Whither is also in digital format. And if I also have a couple of pages of the star names given to these characters and their 19th or 20th century equivalents. I recognize some of the names, some I don't, but it's interesting if you're going to read this and follow the genealogy of it.